quickly right here talk about for Bill Gates, Microsoft right here, and you have right here of talking about whenever it comes to with accounts though, and how many of us have thought of that to where that the first thing that you're going to maybe get, or maybe if it's going to be invested or something like that. Let's just say if it's going to be a permit or a license, or maybe if it's just for a digital camera. And I'm sure a lot of us will probably say too, even if you're going to go out and buy a digital camera, that you're going to probably think as to where that there's maybe something that you might have, something valuable that you had that's that's known produced that's sponsored through Microsoft. And let's say if it's Nectel, or if it's another source of company especially. But you see right here that this right here is a painting, this illustration painting right here I want to put together right here, talk about with Bill Gates right here. So let's just say if I were to be maybe writing a paper about Bill Gates and want to know just a little bit too, to where the founder of Microsoft, but let's just say that with like Bill Gates though, let's just say that maybe if I could maybe say something like, was he like maybe the software developer, or maybe the cloud, manager, or somebody like that. So at the time, it sure seems that way, like almost everybody else who's maybe going to be, professionals in this computer, using computers, and even if it is supercomputers. And I want to know just a little bit too, to where that when exactly was the cloud storage, the online cloud, when was that introduced, and as well as cloud engineering, and as well as with all this other stuff, so far as with all these other computer programs, especially. And I could probably think of a couple of them, but if it's maybe Microsoft Honey, and as well as Excel, Microsoft 365, those other sorts of programs. But number one, it sure seems that way, to where that whenever we check our account, though, a lot of times whenever we check our Microsoft account, that it sure seems that way, to where that if you're going to maybe have like a profile page especially. But I can be honest with everybody here, the very first system that I did own back those years ago was the Xbox. Yeah, it was the Xbox. And with the Xbox, that tell everybody too, is to where with the Xbox, that the only thing that I really knew about the Xbox was actually about the fact about is that whenever you start the gameplay, that you would actually buy the games for it. But I think that was even before the Xbox Live and everything was even announced, and that was back in 2001, and I can remember that whenever I first bought the Xbox, I can just remember that I went from that normal Nintendo 64 to the Xbox, and it's like a lot of stuff about Microsoft and all that stuff that they were talking about. Other than buying a CD player, other than buying that particular CD player, or maybe if it's the old-fashioned record player, whichever you want to call it, that it sure seems that way, to where the first thing that you had to get used to whenever I got the Xbox was the fact about that you buy an Xbox, but then find out that it's got 4 players. You had that ability to where you could play with 4 other players, but then also it was the memory cards, actually, that you no longer had to buy the memory cards, because I can remember right that it was a Nintendo 64, other game consoles that I've owned, that it was the memory cards that I was a lot of times was used to going out and buying the memory cards, and then conventional pack and all, especially for the Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64, I can remember that. There are a lot of things that I had to buy separately whenever it comes to playing a game for the Nintendo game console, or maybe for the PlayStation. But it was not Windows 98 or any edition like that, but it was the Xbox. The Xbox was one of the very first consoles that I owned that sponsored through Microsoft, and so that's why it sure seemed that way, to where that looking back at all that looking back at all that progress, if you want to kind of call it, is that at the time you weren't to where that really, with Microsoft, like Bill Gates, and maybe if it's other, all those other billionaires that you hear about, and want to know too is to where that, yeah, guaranteed to work a lot of times but every time I go shopping, or maybe if it's every time that I'm going to be thinking about an idea about what I want to buy next, a lot of times it seems like it was about that, as long as it's produced through Microsoft, and a lot of times it's like a lot of the Microsoft products that I have used and I have owned, that most of them work pretty well actually, but it sure seems that way to where that maybe after 5 years or so, and it's like it's time to upgrade, but still that but talk about right here with Bill Gates right here, that I painted this right here is actually to make it look like Bill Gates right here, and anybody say that yeah, well, other than maybe with the glasses or something like that, but still that yeah, that so let's just say if this right here would be an example of for a profile right here, but still that but and I'll go and talk to everybody here about right here, talk about right here. This was me right here on the desk right here, and let's just say if I were to be writing a paper about Bill Gates, and people say exactly what do you think that you would be saying about Bill Gates necessarily? I'm like, yeah, was he this yeah, he's the founder of from Microsoft, but I think it was back in 1974 or something like that. But anyway, one of the first personnel to invent the computer, but the very first computer. But I tell you one thing that you want to know too. I'm like, talk about for data science especially. But half the time that people I say is to where that do you remember a lot of times back whenever you were in high school that people were asking you that if you could invent something, then what do you think it would be, and what do you think it would be used for, and all that. But I actually the type of invention that I had to come to mind that was actually was related to a bottle of water. Believe it or not, it was not related to anything really electronically, but it was actually related to a bottle of water. But keeping the water cool, fresh, and filtered. While you're carrying around and in a backpack. But still, that was about about a bottle of water. But talk about here, here's the American flag right here. But I don't know if everybody has seen all this stuff right here. But talking about gradual, digital is only the beginning and all that. But really though, I want to know too that about Bill Gates though, that before digital technology was even announced though, that I'm sure people say that that digital, I guess. When exactly was digital first found? And I would probably say I would maybe assume that it was back in 1998. Whenever they first started announcing digital software. So let's just say if I could use that for like an example, talk about for back in 1998 is when they first announced digital, and let's just say that digital. It was known for maybe for the pagers, and then also the cameras, but then also it was for the caller ID. And I think back in 1998, back in early in 97, that was around the time that caller ID was first announced. So when we look back at all this, whenever it comes to business though, especially. Whenever we kind of go back and look back at all this progress that's come around to where that when certain products and items were first being announced, though, and you're likely learned too, is that number one though, that whenever you were first heard about it, that people like I say is to where did you go out and buy it right away, or if anything did you have to learn it first before you actually used it more, or what did you think about that? But I'm like, well, really. Does really anything new really have to include a voucher, such as, or you didn't go out and buy it right away because, you want to make sure that, Mike, the money, but then also that, just think about it, is just toward that whenever it comes to learning new things, especially. So whenever I went out to go out and bought that brand new Xbox. That whenever I bought the Xbox, even the Xbox 360, back whenever I bought that brand new, actually, that if I can remember right, I had to get used to the fact about that you no longer had to buy memory cards for it. That if I can remember, better graphics, but then also the memory cards, because they say the bigger hard drive, and then whenever I actually did get whenever I got my own my actual home computer, though, it was like a lot of things that you had to get adjusted to, and one of those that was actually about the computer program the computer, but then also that signing in if you don't have an account, and then you'll be able to create an account. So that's another thing that I want to mention to everybody about is that whenever you go out and buy whenever you're going to be using these sorts of if it's going to be a phone, or if it's going to be a tablet or some sort of device like that, is that half the time it sure seems that way, to where that for most beginners, though, they might find it more challenging, and that you may have to spend about 25 or so % of more time trying to get it all figured out, and it might take you about maybe a full week just to figure out everything for beginners. And let's just say that if you had to charge at the device, and as well as that you had to create an account and all that other stuff, but if I can remember right, that whenever I first got the Xbox, though, that if I could it was I actually was able to play play a game on that Xbox for about 2 or 3 hours. I say, believe it or not, tell everybody that that your very first computer that you've ever owned was actually the Microsoft, the HP Microsoft I think what type of not USB connector, not even a printer too, but it was the Parallel or something like that, type of computer. But still, it was an older computer, but if I can remember right, that whenever I first got on that Xbox, and whenever I first got on that computer, I can just remember to where that you plug a game in there and it starts playing, right? But whenever you first got your own computer, though, it was like that I remember that you set an account, and if I can remember right, that the first time I used that computer, I can remember that, to where that I set a password, and with that password that I was able to memorize it, so anybody who was getting on there and just showing me how to any upgrades, computer upgrades and all that. So at the time you weren't too, is to where that whenever you first buy your own first computer, though, that after you purchase one, it sure seems that way, to where that you are given an activation code and all that. But it sure seems that way, to where that one thing to remember, though, that if we've done our statistics studies, and as well as the data science, the software development and the data science, that making sure that you save your password, that you set a password, and you save it for your as a login. And so nowadays, almost everything we do, it sure seems that way, to where that either you had to register, or if anything, that you had to set a password. And so it sure seems that way, to where that having your own home computer, though, especially. And so whenever I think about that, I'm like, with Bill Gates, though, and people I get thinking too, is to where that he's the founder of Microsoft, but then also the inventor. But I guess due to the whole pandemic and everything, I begin to want to know too, to where people may think too that how are you really going to be able to remind everybody to keep your social distancing, and as well as with wear a mask, that's just for your protection as well, and as well as that knowing about with me, though, in case if anybody that may ask me that do you think that maybe that they're going to maybe announce on the news to where that you had to make sure that you wear plenty of lotion drink plenty of water, and then have plenty of lotion on. So I have not heard anything about that yet, but still. But whenever I was working on this right here, I actually wanted to also make Bill Gates look a little bit more like he's got like a real good college source of education right here. So whenever I was putting this painting together right here, I actually wanted to make it look like, in case of anybody that may say that if you know anybody who's a millionaire or a billionaire, that you might think too is to her about those who do have college education, a college degree in any sorts of business related, or maybe if it's a bachelor's degree of science, and maybe if it's studying about statistics, physics, or maybe architecture studies or something like that. So it's like, want to know just a little bit too, to where that if you're going to be taking any sorts of college courses, especially if it's computer classes though, and you want to know just a little bit too, to where that about how well do you know about that computer, and especially if we're talking about supercomputers, especially. So the type of supercomputer I'm talking about is the type of system that has a mind of its own, actually. And so people may think to where that besides the Alexa, that you want to know too, is to where there's going to be this type of supercomputer to where I really don't know, everybody. I really don't know if there's going to maybe be a supercomputer that's maybe going to show like a little holograph of the American flag, to where that you're going to maybe have it to where that all you really need is maybe if anything a 3D projector. You just need a 3D like a little stick figure type device to where you would actually be able to present the American flag. It's like a computer to where it shows like a little display of the American flag, and you can maybe add like different sorts of special effects, some sorts, to that flag. But the way I think about it too, though, that when we think about computers, though, another way of how you want to look at a computer, though, is that you want to look at this computer as like another way of, you want to say, is to where your closet partner, to where something that you can keep handy, and let's just say something that you can program. You program that computer to where that it would remind you to do something, or remind you to work something. And so it's another way of how you want to describe a supercomputer, is to where that the ability to where that computer would be able to read your mind. So like with me though, that the different ways of how we want to use our mind thinking, especially like on an everyday process, and that you're likely wondering too, is to where that when we think about something, though, that do you think that maybe the most computers should be like that? Most computers should be like that, to where that whenever we think about something, that's basically another way of how to generate something in your mind, right? When we think about something, and but still, that do you think that also requires like a type of computer chip, to where that really, I don't know about one of those computer chips that's really gonna send your information to all those top $1 million companies, or whichever you call it, but the type of computer chip I'm talking about is associated with a resume, actually. Telling people that, if you want to use my ideas, and then you'll go and hire me for the job. That's the type of thinking I'm thinking about. But a lot of people are probably thinking too that, really, that does that really require a college education, or does it really, involve really about the mind of the thinking, especially. But I also want to mention everybody here, or talk about what does commission basically mean. Now, whenever somebody says commission, though, whenever you get paid a commission, or like any source of bonus, though, you want to know too, is to where that basically means is to where at the time that you'll get paid for the commission, to where that for the service, especially for how well the service works, basically on the operation of study, especially if we're talking about maybe the sales, as well as for how business does and all that stuff. So when we think about commission, though, that's just another way of studying, to where that yeah, that if you want to kind of look at it as toward it, just a little bit toward it, yeah, that the services that were used just to be able to to do the job. So let's just say that if you were to get paid for commission, you're basically are being paid, for the time and service that while you're working. You're not getting paid per sale. But the way we do business nowadays, and I really don't know if that's really about how it's always been, really. But the way we think about business doing nowadays, it sure seems that way to where that maybe per employee, per client, that per employees is to where that the time management that they put into working a job process, and as well as how many people that were hired to work for that company, especially. But the way I think about too, though, that way I think about digital, though, people say that, yeah, well, whenever we think about Bill Gates, especially, though, that digital did not come into into that source of generation until early in 1998, didn't it? I would probably say too about back in 1998, maybe if it was back in early in 1996, that whenever digital was first announced. And people are thinking too is toward it, yeah, well, digital, that was it the cameras, or was it really maybe the x-rays, stuff that they were using there in the medical lab that they were to consider, for talk about for digital. But still, that when we think about Bill Gates, though, especially, and say, yeah, that person, founder, of Microsoft, but still, that people say if you're going to be writing a paper, talk about for Bill Gates right there, you want to know too that yeah, well, those, especially those who have a Microsoft account, would have access, that ability to where they can go and shop and membership discounts and all that. And so a lot of what I do see, even from the phone here and even from the computer, though, a lot of things that I do see that I could thinking too is to where a lot of people, a few people who do understand a little bit what I'm talking about, but talk about for an account, though, for managing an account, that when we go to accounts, like whenever we navigate from our phones, like from the iPhone, that when we look at those accounts, though, that those who do have accounts, though, you would maybe have that ability to where you can actually download mobile apps, and you can actually shop around, and you have that ability to where you can actually stream live videos, and perform actual live streaming, and actually have that to where you can actually take the control to somebody else's phone and actually help guide them to where something that you want to show them and all that. So it sure seems that way to where that what I usually see, though, whenever I talk about for like for Microsoft, and it could also be like Apple and Seagate, other company providers especially, that besides the Xbox, that game console that I had, I'm like, yeah, I still have it, but I can remember that whenever I first got the Xbox, though, it was like, it was just kind of like hard getting used to the fact about whenever you turn the game console on, then you also had to set the time zone, and you also had to set, I'm like, yeah, that every time you play a game, it would actually calculate about when the game was played and how many players, and as well as that, if there was any saved games, in the inventory and all that. So I remember those days. I'm like, yeah, I can remember the Xbox, and I remember that every game that you plugged into the play, that it would show that in your library. So it was like going from a Nintendo 64 to the actual Xbox, that it was like, that besides the graphics, though, that whenever you upgrade to a new game console, though, sponsored through Microsoft, it was like just getting used to the fact that you did not have to worry about that, making sure that the memory card was inserted. I'm like, people say, yeah, you don't have to add no memory cards or anything to the Xbox, and so it sure seems that way to where about almost everything that you buy nowadays, that they say is to where you have that option to where you can add additional memory. You could buy additional memory from an account. But it sure seems that way that when we think about Bill Gates right here, and I kept wondering too that that if you have an account, then you can actually you have that ability to where you can shop and you can earn points, and as well as if you're going to be contacting even technical, if you're going to be contacting a service support team, the tech support team, and they're able to pull up your account if you have an account with them. So a lot of that stuff, a lot of the stuff that they talk about, especially if it's Apple or if it's Microsoft, reminds me a lot of back whenever I was young, sitting at that desk right there, whenever I was a student, because, having an account is just like sitting at a desk right here. It's just like sitting at a desk right here with my name on it, and then if you have a few books and magazines, or maybe a few notebooks, and maybe even a catalog to look at or something like that. And you'll want to know too is to where that if you don't have an account, and then you need to set an account, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way to where that whenever I first got the Xbox, I can remember that to where you turn on the Xbox, and then it's going to ask you to go ahead and set the time and the time zone and all that. But whenever I first got my first computer, though, it was like that to where it would ask you to go ahead and sign in, create a password, create a source code, and so all this other stuff that at first it was like, I can tell you, everybody, be honest with everybody here, that that my very first cell phone, my very first computer, it was like, I think, after about 15, 20 minutes that I was able to make a phone call with that very first phone that I had. A lot of that stuff that went digital during the time, that, that was back in 2001, actually. And I could just remember, though, that, did I really have it, real complicated compared to everybody else? Well, I guess kind of not really, but I gradually got to figure it out eventually. But I tell you one thing, though, that, whenever it comes to learning new things, though, it sure seems that way to where that, number one, though, that people may think is to where that, why is it that it seems like it's hard to get a job, based on my resources compared to, whenever you're able to get things working at your own time, and compared to actually applying for a job and find out that you didn't get that job, and you're likely weren't too. It's exactly what sorts of resources do you think that you have to be qualified you to be able to get that job? And but I think a lot of it also has to do with the right license, and just to kind of explain to the hiring team about what you're capable of doing, especially. And so that's why it sure seems that way to where that but still that at the time it sure seems that way to where that. When we think about jobs, though, that are we necessarily thinking about, for being chosen, or that maybe if you really have to be working while other companies are actually able to look into your resume, and this company is actually going to be making their decisions about who they're going to hire, who that company is going to hire, just because that, we've seen your resume. We've seen your resume, and we've actually been looking at the work that you've been doing. But still. So it sure seems that way to where that where does the whole marketing part, where does the whole hiring part really begin necessarily? And at the time, it sure seems that way to where you had to be busy just for it to work. And at the time, it sure seems that way that that's the case. You had to be busy with something just for it to work. You just cannot just be waiting around and thinking as to where that you're going to maybe get that surprise message, that surprise phone call about a job opportunity. It sure seems that way that you just really have to keep busy. You just really have to stay busy. And say, you can take breaks, but at the time it sure seems that way that you just really have to stay busy, just to be able to get the process to work. Because once you're busy, then maybe that a lot of companies that might even say too is to where that's one thing about it, is to where it's guaranteed to work. When companies and businesses see that it's working, then chances are that they're gonna go ahead and pick, for who they want to hire. But really though, from what I see, even from my emails, though, for what I see, even from any source of messages, though, at the time, it sure seems that way to where that, was it really about the application that you recently filled out, or was it about the fact about, that, yeah, expand the audience? I'm like, yeah, people who actually looked at your work on what you were doing, and then I would say knowing about for who they're going to hire, especially. But really, it kind of got my idea about the fact about that having an accountant, especially, but somebody like me who has the knowledge about knowing about a lot of that technology, about how a lot of that technology works, especially. But talk about with Bill Gates, though, especially that whenever I think about Bill Gates, especially that yeah, that you kind of look at that as like yeah, he's an inventor, especially that he was the founder of Microsoft, but I would probably say too is to where that that whenever I think about Bill Gates, though, I'm like, I actually think about a profile, an account, and so yeah, that whenever you think about Bill Gates, do you necessarily think about your recent purchase, or do you really necessarily think about as to where that yeah, that you're a member, you are a Microsoft member, and back I'm like, yeah, of course, anybody say that really that you had to be at least 18 to 25 or so, just to qualify for a lot of stuff that they talk about, even through companies like Microsoft and all that. But still, that when we think about a profile, though, and people are likely thinking too that yeah, well, if you have an account, number one, but then second of all is just knowing about is to where, yeah, well, if you are a student, or maybe if you are a business personnel, or maybe if you have a license to work there in the lab or something like that. And so at the time, it sure seems that way that that yeah, the job, but the job industry and all that stuff, it sure seems that way that there's a lot more to it than maybe from what you heard. But let's just say though that yeah, that when we think about this, about talking about accounts, though, that I mainly got the license mainly just to learn the basics, but then also that yeah, you were actually training somebody on how to do something. And so people may say is to word it, yeah, well, if you're going to have a Microsoft account, and let's just say if you're going to be training somebody else on how to use it, or let's just say that that if you were assigned a job, to report to a project or something like that. And so at the time, I'll tell everybody here too, to be quite honest with everybody, that whenever I check my emails, though, and at the time, it seems like a lot of the things that I get on those emails, it's like, what are you talking about, man? I don't know anything about that. Or okay, there's a job opening. There's a job opening for maybe for a field manager or something like that, or for a truck driver or something like that. And but a lot of times, whenever I check my emails, though, it sure seems that way to where that yeah, that maybe not all businesses and companies are going to be relying on an application, just to be able to go to the next steps. And it sure seems that way to where that if there's a company that's founded by us, to where if they're able to look at a profile like through Microsoft, and let's just say that anything that looks very familiar to them, and they're gonna maybe say is that yeah, well, I sent you an email this morning, and wanted to go over some resources and facts about for the job opportunity here in town. And so a lot of times it's like this from the past. Yeah, about, I would say about once a week, something like that. I'm going to maybe be getting a message or a phone call about something like that. And, it could maybe be in Chicago, St. Louis, or maybe Arkansas, or maybe Florida, or New York City, that there's going to maybe be somebody that's going to maybe, trying to contact me about, job, or it's also maybe going to be about, work that's needed or something like that. And at the time, it's like 102, yeah, that, yeah, you got to be careful about, all those scams and as well like all that other stuff about ads and all that. But way I think about it too though that yeah, that what I see on those emails a lot of times, it's also even including the weather forecast. Just to be able to read the weather and just to stay updated about what's going on with the news and all that. But a lot of what I do see by email also is also important stuff too. So sometimes it sure seems that way to where that whenever you're going to be applying for a job, that a lot of companies are going to be asking about the account information. They're not really going to be asking about, a contact number or anything like that. If anything, they're going to say that, we can look, up your information about your resume and your profile if they had, the account, if they can look up your account information, from their side. So it's like, let's say if you're talking to somebody and maybe in Idaho, maybe that the state of, Idaho, or maybe if it's the state of Ohio or somewhere state like that, and you're likely worrying too is to where that they're able to find your information about the computer, and as well as if it's technical support, anything like that. And so it sure seems that way to where a lot of things that I hear about and see, especially on those emails. And is it going to kind of remind you if you're going to be sitting at the desk right here and want to know just a little bit too that what are you talking about, man? What about that message? Or what about the activation code or something like that? Or what about the follow-up appointment or whichever? And so a lot of times that whenever I check my emails, everybody, I can be honest with everybody here too. Whenever I check my emails, that it sure seems that way to where that the application process, there's a package ready or something like that, for the new release products or something like that. And so it sure seems that way to where that having a profile and having an email, what do you know? How do you know whenever step 1 and step 2 is already taken care of? All this company asks you to do is just to confirm your information, and as well as is to where we have a good package deal ready for you, for just for $39.95 or something like that, or that you are qualified for for an upgrade or something like that. A lot of marketing a lot of marketing, and as well as a lot of sales, discount, ads and all that stuff that you get by email. But I guess the point to where I'm making is to where that nowadays that they have it to where that you can actually shop online and have this product delivered to you by email. So you no longer have to worry. I'm like, yeah, you may have, you may get something in the mail, such as maybe for backup copies or something like that, or maybe for like the special package offer or something like that. But a lot, what I'm actually talking about is to where whenever you actually shop and even from those online accounting stores, that it sure seems that way to where that whenever you shop though, that the first thing that you might say is to where that if you're going to be applying for a job especially, but at the time you weren't to where that that job is going to include a package, or if anything just like a little study guide especially. But at the time it sure seems that way to where that whenever you first were introduced to Microsoft, you were a student, and so people may say as to where that, well, really though, that if you're a beginner or if you're a learner at all this stuff, but I'll tell them that I don't own the business. I'm just I'm a student, so. I'm sure maybe most of all of us would probably say too that if you're going to have an account and if you're going to be a member, through a company like through Microsoft or Seagate or some company like that, or Apple, that you tell them is to where you're a student. You were a student whenever you got that account, but still. But let's just say though that if you're going to be a student and want to know just a little bit too to all that stuff that you got to follow up with especially, and want to know just a little bit too to where that, do you think that the whole point of the matter, the whole fact of the matter should be about is to where about supercomputers. This computer would have a mind of its own, to where you have a computer that's able to read your mind. That's able to read your mind, right? Just like that right there. That's able to read your mind. Anything that you think about, it's already programmed onto this computer, and then that computer is able to correspond, with what you're working with. And other than the phone and other than that laptop computer that you might have, that's the type of computer that I'm thinking about, is to where that computer has the power to where it's able to recognize for who you are. And so that's why it sure seems that way, to where that when I think about computers, especially motion graphics, especially like with graphic design, that the type of computer that I'm talking about is actually talking about is to where with this computer, what do you see what do you see that's going to be going on in the near future? I might say, yeah, well, what I actually see going on in the future actually is actually talking about is to where things that may seem difficult now that aren't so difficult, later on. But, people may have it, a little bit differently also. But I could probably think too that, we got these, advanced vacuum cleaners and all this, all these self-driving cars and all that stuff. And, like at the time, I do want to know too, is to where that, what do we think about the washing machines and the dryers and the dishwashers? I'm like, it sure seems like from over the years, the washing machines and dryers really have not changed a whole lot. Even the lawnmowers. But I say, well, they make those self-operating lawnmowers too. But still, but you talk about with computers, though. But still, I know me, though, that back whenever I was young, it's like, say that, yeah, it was a video game, but let's just say if it was a calculator. People say, yeah, calculator sponsored through Microsoft. And you're likely learn, too, that, back whenever I was young, and people may say, too, that, was math always easy for you back whenever you were young? Trying to memorize your multiplication tables and trying to figure out the long division and calculus problems and all that. And you're probably thinking, too, that maybe that would have been one of the reasons why that you bought a computer in the first place. So that way you can be able to keep all those mathematical type problems and all that studying type problems. Keep it all in one place so you can go back to it later on and kind of study more about that. But still, we talk about electronically also. But talk about right here, you got there's for July 18th right there. And so, yeah, I'm like, I was a student, back whenever I was, whenever I first got the Xbox, and people are thinking, too, is to where that, you have a computer that's able to read, your mind thinking, and then, and then you have a computer, but, still, you'll be able to work in front of your computer also. But the one thing I want to mention to everybody here, talk about for Bill Gates right here, is actually that if you're going to be studying from home, especially if you're going to have your own home computer, especially, and so you know how that is. If you're going to have your own home computer, though, that basically means is to where that computer system is not really being modified. It's not really being recorded. It's not really being modified, and so. If you're going to be filling out, completing any source of application, if you're going to be filling out any source of paperwork, though, that there's it seems like to me that a lot of these computers would have to have this special type of software and malware built in, especially to the latest computers. If you're going to be using a later computer, that anything that needs to be modified and recorded just to verify, just for security purposes. So it sure seems that way, that people may say that, if you're going to be using an older system such as, the Windows 8, or maybe, downgraded from that, if anything, maybe the Windows 10 edition, of Microsoft computer, then I better say that, and especially if you're going to be, doing your homework, especially in front of the computer, and want to know just a little bit too, to where that, there has to be, somebody to verify that information, or if anything, you had to have the newest computer release of that would be able to modify that information. But tell everybody too that yeah, if you're going to be working in front of your computer though, like it sure seems that way to where that compared to actually being in the computer labs over there at the schools though, it's like they have it to where that about that computer though, about how to take care of the computer and how to use the computer. And sometimes a lot of those computer labs might say too that they'll only give you maybe 2 hours, to work on it, and then you gotta pass it off to the next person who needs to use it. And having your own home computer really helps out a lot with that. But a lot of people would probably say too that really though that it seems like it's all about trying to understand how to use that computer, because we all know that having a computer that we don't quite understand about how to use all of it too. And at the time you want to know too that do you really have to have like a type of screensaver to where that whenever you first buy a brand new computer, and let's just say if it's a Mac, that you want to know too is to where that you go ahead and have like what you call a set photo ID or something like that, and whenever you do upgrade. But still, trying to get that computer to recognize the information, and as well as updating certain updates that need to be proceed when with the updates and all that. But I just really think too that whenever I think about Bill Gates though, and people say people say that that whenever you think about Bill Gates though, that he was say that that time that inventor for the first computer. And how many of us will maybe think is to where whenever you think about Bill Gates, do you think of him also as maybe as like a type of scientist, or maybe the doctor, or if anything was he a truck driver, or was he a lawyer? And how many of us will maybe guess he was a lawyer. Bill Gates is a lawyer. Bill Gates, Bill Gates was a lawyer, but say no, he was the inventor, founder of Microsoft. But I really don't know how many of us will maybe think as to where that would you even guess that he was a lawyer? But I would say that Bill Gates though, I'm like, he's not a lawyer, but still that. But I just really think too is to when I think about Bill Gates right here, and just think about it, it's like you go ahead and draw out this, and Bill Gates right there with the glasses right here. And I want to know too that that whenever you think about a lot of your class photos, especially that if you want to go and kind of look back at a lot of those class photos and want to know about what class photo do you think that was taken whenever you first learned the basics about your very first computer. That I got a few examples I could probably show everybody, but that if you want to flip through a few pages, whichever. But still that I know with me though that my class photo that was taken those years ago, that people are thinking too is to where that about what age were you whenever you first learned how to use the calculator, whenever you first got your own graphical calculator, whenever you first learned how to use the digital key, and as well as the digital camera and all that. And the high-tech one step high-tech technology, that sorts of stuff. But the way I think about too though that whenever it comes to accounts though, that whenever you think about Bill Gates though, and likely one or two, that whenever you first got your own computer, and want to know just a little bit too to where that a lot of that stuff that you use for like Microsoft 365, that you may only got it for work purposes, but like anybody will probably think too is to where that you may have gotten it for that reason, but still that you might check, you might get emails about marketing tips and all that. But one thing that we can maybe think about, what's one thing that I really do see on that Microsoft account that maybe not everybody really realizes is over the fact about that, while you're signed into that Microsoft account, that you may have more space to use in that Microsoft account, and that you might have to where that you can now download and install this new app available for Microsoft users. So one thing that I did know, I'm like, yeah, especially Skype, and I can tell everybody here too that once I figured out the basics about the new Windows 10, it was actually Skype that I actually use. I usually use Microsoft to be able to sign into like accounts like Skype, and as well as other. I'm like, that people say is to where that you can now even sign in using your Google account, and I think even Facebook too. But still, that I use my Microsoft account just to be able to sign into a lot of those sites, and they say too that that even typing up a resume, and even if you're going to be maybe buying Skype credit or maybe downloading a new edition of a certain software program or something like that, that it sure seems that way to where that they say is that making sure that you have an account, and so it sure seems that way to where that back whenever you were a student, those couple years ago, it was like that you probably used to all that Microsoft stuff. You may have seen a lot of that whenever it comes to get ready to take the history test and get ready to take the math test and all that. But really though, that if you're going to be shopping around, and let's say if you're going to be shopping around, getting on your Microsoft account and checking out the mobile apps and all that, and one just a little bit too to where that people, if you get a message on there stating to where that please add a photo, please add some source of identification to your account, and please add a number, and please program your account to where you can receive messages on, but the message alerts and all. But I just really think too that in case of people say is to where do you have your Microsoft account set to where that you're recognized by your designs, especially? I'm like, well, really though, that I think I do, but really though, that I just don't really have a whole lot of time with it, to be quite honest with everybody. But I don't know if I can really show everybody here, or if anything for the next time about how Microsoft recognizes my system just by whenever I go browse through the different files and looking at all the different folders, and I'm like all the files and all that, and as well as surfing the cloud and all that. But what I probably can say is that with my Microsoft account is that whenever I do use it even from my mobile phone here, that what I actually see though is to where that updates that are automatically installed, and as well as that if there's any I'm like that back whenever I was young, that you probably thought too is to where that managing a Microsoft account, that probably thinking is to where that back whenever I did not have an account during the time, and you're probably thinking too that well, if you're not going to have an account, then chances are I'm like that what can you get with an account, and what can you get if you're a member? Well, it's possible that your warranty may not be good, or that they say that you may not be able, you could be missing out on a lot of savings too. You could be missing out on a lot of being able to redeem points and earn points and credits and all that on your Microsoft account, especially. But still, that you're having a photo ID right here, and like anybody say that that looking at this painting right here, it's going to kind of remind me about the fact about if you were a student at one time, if you were a student whenever you first got your Microsoft account, and people say is that exactly what is that, with all the glasses and all that, and people say is to where you look at some of your college photos, and want to know just a little bit too that the work in progress. If you look at the college work and as well as the work that you were working on even since the high school years, and want to know just a little bit too toward that the things that look very familiar and the things that are recognized and are automatically recognized. And people say that, yeah, well, I for sure to try and get everybody to recognize this, and but really though, just know I say for digital is only the beginning right there. But anyway, but I know that like everybody will probably think too that whenever it comes to Bill Gates and Microsoft, that how long has digital been around for? I would probably say that maybe since 1995. I would probably say that if anything since 1998. That's around the time that DVD players were just being just coming out, and I'm sure most of us remember those days. Is that when DVD players were just being announced, and other than the VHS tapes and the cassette tapes and then the recorders and all that stuff. So at the time, it sure seems that way that a lot of this digital technology. But I know with me though that digital designing and people may think too is toward it. If you can invent anything, really, that I could probably think too is toward that. Well, really though, that what I'm actually good at actually is about the fact about with my designs toward it. I can go ahead and form a design right here that would look real good, for to present toward it. For any sorts of like a lot of companies will probably say too that there's jobs out there that would actually pay for you to actually say that for you to advertise, for you to describe the good marketing tips, and as well as advertisements, and as well as for what this tells everybody else about for who I am and this is what I do, all that stuff. But still, I've showed other people some new examples too, some other examples especially. But really though, that I mainly want to talk about right here, talk about for Bill Gates, and I'm sure I don't know, really, I guess if everybody has, if everybody has seen this already, but still, that work out a painting right there, talk about for Bill Gates right there, likely thinking too that whenever you're going to have an account, especially that the things that you can do whenever you're going to have an account, just like having a credit card and just like having a pass, being a membership, that other than like insurance, warranty coverage, insurance, memberships, a lot of things that you may not think about is toward it. A lot of stuff that gives you the power, that gives you that ability to where you can do things. And nowadays, it sure seems that way, that you either have to be a business owner or you have to be a student. You have to be a member or a student just to do certain things. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that, what's the best advice that you can give to anybody that, if you're trying to take care of something, and if I say that, well, really, it would help out a lot, if you had, an account. And people may say, you may not use that account very much, and but just to register and just to be able to do certain things, and even due to the pandemic and all that, Mike, just to do certain things, and you'll likely learn too is to where that the first thing is first is to where that do you really have to get a real good score on the SATs, on the test scores. They show good test scores, and as well as what your GPA score was and all that. So I'm sure most of us here were students whenever they first, whenever that he or she first got your first iPhone, your first laptop. You may have been a student, during the time. And so that's why it sure seems that way, to where that, number one, you may have more than one account. You may have about maybe 3 or 4 of them. One that you use for business reasons, one that you use for student reasons, one of them that you may use if you're self-employed, one of them that you might even use for just for personal reasons, that's, anything like that. But really though, that just knowing about the fact about is to where that if you're able to work at your own time and all that, that you want to know too is to where that set in a profile. But still, that's the type of stuff they talk about for Bill Gates. And some people say too is to where if you were to actually write a paper about Bill Gates and do the research about Bill Gates and be like thinking too is to where that Bill Gates the founder for Microsoft, but well, let's just say though that whenever it comes to phones though, you like with the iPhone and as well as the Microsoft for the smartwatches and all that stuff, and you're likely learn too is to where that the stuff that was not founded until about back in early in 1991, something like that. So at the time, you want to know too from all the information, all the technology that they got nowadays. It's like you likely learn too that you be trained on how to use it. But really though, that people say that this was announced and then that was announced and then that was invented, but still that I just really think though that that anything electronically, but I had not heard of the electronic. And I know they probably do like the electronic lighter or anything like that. But I tell you one thing, everybody, that really though, that if you could really invent anything, really, and let's say other than the bottled water, I might say that really though that I could probably say is to where that you try to think of. Trying to invent something, for knowing about for what you use for smart ideas, won't you? But anyway, smart ideas, for intelligence, for good thinking, for smart ideas. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. And talk about the best understanding about Microsoft and talk about for Bill Gates. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great